from Doomblade and move towards other removal spells because of course Doomblade is a blank in the mirror. So that you don't want to have blank cards in the mirror match, especially when the mirror might be the most popular matchup and most often played matchup over the course of the weekend. So as a result, Turtenwald has 4 copies of Devour Flesh. He's got his 4 Heroes Downfalls and 2 Freakish Cures as his removal spells of choice, where William has those Doomblades that you mentioned.
Yeah, and the Cure is obviously very good against beatdown decks. Also a removal spell that can check an opponent's pack rat as well. So
one thing that William does have is Turtenwald's going to start off with a swamp and pass the turn here. One thing that he does have is Whip of Erebos, a card that's really fallen out of favor here among the mono black decks. As Turtenwald's going to be targeted with a Thoughtseize. You see 2 copies of Nightveil Spectre, an Underworld Connections, a pack rat, a Hero's Downfall, and the second land there in a swamp.
So in this spot, I would assume if William can't kill the pack rat, he should definitely take that. Otherwise, Underworld Connections to me feels like one of the most important cards in the mirror match. It's really hard for someone to have a threat that goes unchecked because there's so much removal in the 2 decks. So the mirror match comes down to just outdrawing your opponent.
There's a pack rat and there is a Devour Flesh there from Turtenwald. So that is going to take care of the rat. And we'll see if Owen's actually able to draw the 3rd land here to get the connections online. It doesn't look like he is, so he passes the turn back. Vance is going to play his 3rd land. You see a Hero's Downfall. He's got an Erebos. He's got a Desecration Demon, but he does not have an Underworld Connection. So both players a little bit of back and forth. Turtenwald's going to play a pack rat and pass the turn back. Devour Flesh the draw here from Vance. And he is going to cast that to take care of the rat. So no pack rat activation so far here in 2014. As Turtenwald's going to untap, he'll take a draw, see if he can find his 3rd land. He does not and passes back yet again.
And this is sort of, what I just alluded to. It's very challenging for someone to just get a threat to stick because of the density of removal in these decks. So it's an attrition, a grindy attrition game that's going to come down to, most likely, who's able to draw more cards.
Another creature there from Vance and Desecration Demon, but Turtenwald does draw a Devour Flesh to take care of that. So Vance will gain 6 life. He'll untap those 4 lands. He'll take a draw step. And he does draw a Mutavault, so our first man land of the day is going to come in. He's got 4 mana. Now there is an Erebos, God of the Dead, that does show up here for Vance. So not going to be online for a little while as Turtenwald does just draw and pass the turn back yet again. But, of course, the card drawing engine, especially when he's at 25 life, is something he can really take advantage of.
He's got a ton of life to play with here. And, again, the games are going to come down to a lot of raw card count. And William has a huge edge in that way right now.
Pack rat going to show up here for Vance. Turtenwald going to go to discard step. He's going to discard Underworld Connections and pass the turn. So Vance is going to draw his card. Does not make a pack rat or Erebos activation on the end step there. Going to draw and play a swamp. You see there's a Grey Merchant and I believe 2 copies of Hero's Downfall here in Vance's hand.
And again, William not really applying that much pressure and Owen with a lot of removal in his hand. If William slow plays this and Owen can get his connections online, he can actually kind of match pace card for card.
Vance is going to activate Pack Rat. So we'll see a rat token come into play. That's going to bring the devotion count up to 3. 1 from Erebos, 1 from the rat, 1 from the rat token, because again the Pack Rat token does actually have a casting cost.
Unlike most tokens, which do not, Pack Rat tokens are actually a copy of the card Pack Rat.
It's a little strange that it is that way, but it makes it so that you do know the interaction. No Ratchet Bomb for 0, which is important. So Turtenwald's going to play a Swamp and play a Nightveil Spectre and pass the turn back here.
William again electing not to use Erebos or Pack Rat.
But we'll see. I'm a little surprised not to see Vance attack that turn, just making a Pack Rat in his main phase. Looks like he may have missed some damage there on the last turn. So we'll see what he opts to do on this particular one. Certainly he's ahead in this game, but as you mentioned, he does not want to give Turtenwald the ability to potentially catch up here. So there is a Pack Rat. He's going to play a Nightveil Spectre, excuse me. And now Hero's Downfall is going to take care of that Nightveil Spectre. And he is able to get into the red zone here with a whole bevy of creatures. Does not attack with the Erebos, though. Not sure if he knows that the devotion count is on for that creature.
So Owen with a little bit of unexpected breathing space here. See if he can capitalize. Going to be challenging even in this spot because Owen's hand appears to just be, 1-for-1 removal. Not a lot to actually catch up from a deficit.
You know, in a situation like this, oftentimes you would look towards the cards like Mutavault or Damnation to kind of catch yourself back up, but that does not exist in Mono Black this go around.
Right, it is one of the weaknesses of the deck. Obviously, this is a mirror match, so it's a little bit different, but the deck really struggles to play multiple spells in a turn, so you can get out in front of it. It's challenging for it to catch up. Often it's just Desecration Demon and Grey Merchant that allow it to pull itself back out or simulate playing multiple spells in a turn, because Desecration Demon can shut down multiple creatures on the table. Grey Merchant can drain life for a bunch, but if you're just playing one spot removal spell a turn, if your opponent gets out in front of you, your spells are not very efficient at catching up.
We'll see a beautiful activation here, and everything's going to come into the red zone here for Vance. He'll be attacking for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, until 13 points of damage. Saw Desecration Demon there pre-combat, and Turtenwald is going to concede the game knowing that he cannot catch up. So William Vance is going to win game number 1 here over Owen Turtenwald to start off 2014 here in the Invitational. Excuse me, here in the Open Series. As we'll take a look at the sideboards here, we'll start with Turtenwald's, which I do have in front of me. He has 2 more copies of Freakish Cure to go with the 2 in his main deck, 3 copies of Dark Betrayal, 3 copies of Erebos God of the Dead, 3 Lifebane Zombie, and 4 copies of Duress. Outside of Lifebane Zombie, a lot of these cards are very interesting to want to bring in here. Of course, Freakish Cure is a unique answer to Pack Rat. Be able to gain you some life. Also can take care of Mutavault. Won't take care of Nightveil Spectre, Grey Merchant, or Desecration Demon. So how many of those do you actually want post-board is something to consider. Dark Betrayal, an easy one to sideboard in, of course, because we're in the Mono Black Devotion Mirror match here. Erebos God of the Dead, 3 copies of that, acting as an additional Underworld Connections, blanking opposing Grey Merchants of Asphodel. Do you want to bring in 3 of those? I think is something under consideration. And then Duress, with 4 Thoughtseizes in your main deck already, you have access to 8 discard spells after sideboard, but do you want the full 8?
Yeah, William Vance's sideboard is kind of similar. He doesn't have access to those Erebos, but 2 Contaminated Ground, 4 Duress, 2 Ultimate Price, 2 Doomblade, 2 Dark Betrayal, 3 Lifebane Zombies. So essentially he also has access to a bunch of Duresses and then additional spot removal spells. I think that if you assume that both players are going to Duress, which makes sense, Underworld Connections is one of the most important cards in the matchup, and both decks just have a bunch of spells in them in general, it's challenging to bring in the situational removal spells because they can either be selected or stranded as appropriate. So the cures and, that kind of removal spell, for example, where it's good against certain targets and not good against others, I would be wary about bringing in a bunch of them because once your opponent has 8 discard spells, they're going to, play around it when they have the ability to play around it. You definitely want the removal spells that can catch everything, but the ones that are only good against a narrow class of creatures are much more dangerous. And I do think Owen wants his copies of Erebos in here.
Yeah, would you want the full 3?
I believe so. Yeah,
Okay.
The matchup to me again feels a lot about just raw card count. Assuming both players are making land drops. Owen failed to do that in the first game, and that's what killed him. But otherwise, it's just everything trades with everything else. It's very hard to land a threat that will just stick because the removal, it catches so many different things, especially in the post-board games where we're talking about both players having a bunch of Dark Betrayals. To me, the recipe for winning these games is just draw more cards than the other player, and Erebos fits very nicely into that plan.
Yeah, the one thing I always find very interesting about the Mono Black Mirror is you've got these different stages of the game. You've got the Thoughtseize stage of the game at the early turns. You've got the Pack Rat stage where obviously you have to get that off the board immediately or you'll probably lose under an avalanche of just rat tokens taking place. You've got your Nightveil Spectre stage of the game where you need to kill that because whatever they turn over they can obviously cast because you're in the mirror match. Then there's of course your Grey Merchant of Asphodel stage of the game where drain lives are kind of going back and forth. Connections you want to keep in check. So you've got all these things that are really, really important to take care of. So again, how many discard effects do you want after sideboard? How much removal do you want? Obviously, Dark Betrayal is going to come in, but do you want to leave Devour Fleshes? Do you want to leave Cures? Do you want to leave Downfalls? How good is Desecration Demon in this particular matchup? My instincts are not very because it's actually probably just pretty easy to kill. But at the same time, it is very large and puts on a quick clock on the opponent. So if they are kind of behind and trying to catch back up, Desecration Demon won't allow them to do that, as Turtenwald's going to keep his 7, and Vance is going to take a mulligan.
Yeah, I think that as powerful as Desecration Demon is, it's very hard to imagine a game where you play it and it's powerful in the mirror unless your opponent's draw is non-functional somehow. If they're flooding out or can't cast their spells. But the black deck is so good at fending off just one random large threat that I agree with you that that's probably one of the first ones to go.
One of the things, and I mentioned that it feels kind of like, it feels kind of like the Fairies deck from, years ago. It's just because, with the Fairies matchup, we're mentioning kind of the different stages of the game and the cards that are important. It felt kind of that way with Fairies too. There's the games where, one player has a Pack Rat, or one player has a Bitter Blossom, and one player doesn't, or both players have one. They're trying to kind of swing that battle back and forth. Both players had access to Thoughtseize, both in this deck and in Fairies. The early versions of Fairies had Ancestral Visions, and it often felt that, if you suspended one of those on turn one, if you're the opponent, you almost feel like you can't beat that because it's going to come off. There's just those different stages of the games that took place, and it felt very, very swingy. But at the same time, oftentimes the player that won, unsurprisingly, was the player who understood, what to do in each situation. I feel like that's what happens a lot here, too, of, handling those different stages of the games appropriately.
Yeah, I do actually really like that that comparison as we see William lead off with the Thoughtseize here. There are draws that if player A has and player B doesn't, where player A just kind of gets to win the game. But assuming that doesn't happen, then it's a lot about understanding the matchup. And the Mono Black Mirror feels very similar to this. It's, there's definitely draws that one player can get, an unchecked Pack Rat and unchecked Underworld Connections, where the other person's just kind of blown out.
Yep.
But assuming that doesn't happen, there's understanding what's actually happening in the games is really important.
Turtenwald's going to play a couple copies of Temple of Deceit to get started here. He's going to play a Swamp as his third land. And this is a game where he actually does have lands to function. He's got some Scrying to start off the game to smooth out his draw steps. Now he actually gets to play some Magic this go around. So we'll see if this game is different from the previous one.
And you see Owen plays Connections there in lieu of playing a Night Veil Spectre. And I really like that play a lot. Again, it's very unlikely that Pack Rat just gets to go the distance here once your opponent has a bunch of removal spells in their hand. So the priority is just get your card drawing online as fast as possible.
See the third land there from Vance is a Nykthos, as Turtenwald's going to play a Pack Rat and just pass the turn back. Nykthos is a one-of in his list. Turtenwald doesn't have any, but you can see part of the problem with Nykthos in that, yes, it can do some pretty amazing things. His ultimate price is going to take care of Pack Rat, but if he has a Night Veil Spectre in his hand, he actually can't cast it right now, as Turtenwald's going to take a draw step here with Connections. Looks like he has found his fourth mana, so now his deck is really online because now here comes the Spectre, and now he's able to just keep drawing cards and present questions that Vance has to answer almost immediately.
Yeah, and if Vance doesn't get his own card drawing online or doesn't present some sort of threat that Owen can't handle for whatever reason, he's going to really struggle to keep up the way that this game is getting played.
So there's Night Veil Spectre there for Vance. We'll see if Turtenwald has removal spell. He does have that Dark Betrayal in his hand, so now across comes the Spectre. Going to cast that first before doing anything. Doesn't draw a card with Connections. Wants to see what he's going to find. There's a Thoughtseize off the top of the deck, and you can see the power of Spectre in this matchup where any card that you turn over pretty much at any point, you're going to be happy to find. Now Thoughtseize is going to reveal the contents of Vance's hand. You've got a Devour Flesh, an Ultimate Price, and 2 copies of Hero's Downfall.
Yeah, and this is the problem with having too much removal in your deck is, without applying any pressure and without drawing cards, that it's very easy for Owen to sort of play around this stuff, fend it off, remove the relevant stuff with discard, make William spend his mana inefficiently by taking the cheaper removal, all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about finding that healthy balance, right, of the amount of removal that you're supposed to have versus the amount of threats versus the amount of card drawing that you need to have in this matchup. And if any player knows the answer to those questions, we're watching him play right now on the right side of the camera in Owen Turtenwald, as he's going to take the Ultimate Price. He's going to play a Mutavault as his land and just pass the turn back.
And Owen debating about
I think he's considering casting a Pack Rat right now.
Yeah, he may want to try to just set up. He's going to cast it. I was thinking he may want to try to set up a spot where he tries to play a Pack Rat and enough mana to make another Rat to try to overwhelm William's mana on how much removal he can play in one turn. But Owen's so far ahead on cards, he's not really married to any individual threat here. He can just play the card drawing game this way.
I also like the way that this constricts Vance's turn because he does have to actually use a removal spell on probably Pack Rat instead of Night Veil Spectre. That means the Night Veil Spectre is alive, and then he gets to hit and do its thing. Thoughtseize here from Vance is going to take a Gray Merchant, going to leave Turtenwald with a Gray Merchant, a Devour Flesh, and a Hero's Downfall. But I don't think Turtenwald really cares if the Pack Rat dies, and it constricts Vance's turn in a big way. And now Pack Rat's going to live, and so now this is kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation because now the Rat gets to start going crazy.
Yeah. All Owen should really be prioritizing at this point is mana efficiency.
Yeah.
He's ahead on cards. All the cards in each of these decks really, just trade with one another for the most part. So just be efficient with your mana.
Turtenwald going to play a pack rat that was just drawn off the top. He'll be an activation, discarding Devour Flesh, and get in there for 3. And now, of course, as we've seen a time or two in the Mono Black Devotion Mirror, once there are 3 rats on the board, it's almost impossible to get them off of the board. You can pinpoint removal, like this Hero's Downfall, towards one of them, but you still have to worry about the rest of them, and you can't actually get them all off the board because there is no Mutilate or Damnation coming.
As you see, Owen top deck another rat.
Ah, must be so nice.
Yep. This is, of course, the issue is once you get behind, you're not catching back up. And Owen's really ahead in every facet of the game here. Life total, cards, mana in play. He has it all covered.
Yep. And after William's going to take another draw here, he is going to concede the game under the avalanche of rats and Mutavaults that are coming towards him. So Owen Turtenwald is going to even up this matchup here between Mono Black Devotion. It's 1-1 as we are going to make our way into game number 3 here. Now, one thing you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner is Turtenwald kind of looking through his configuration of his deck while Vance is simply shuffling, happy with his. Wonder if anything changes play versus draw in this matchup.
I would imagine that when you're on the draw, you need to just make sure that you have more answers to an opposing pack rat. As you get buried a little bit easier and your opponent has the ability to set up turn 1 discard spell into turn 2 pack rat. So I would assume that you have to be a little bit more wary of pack rat when you're on the draw. It's always good to just check these things anyway.
I agree. Always want to take a look, make sure that you're happy with the configuration that you do have in place, which it looks like the former Player of the Year is doing. We'll see if he does shift anything in or out here as we do go. But for those of you guys just joining us this morning, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Star City Games Open Series here. First one of 2014. We're both excited to be here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We no real travel problems yesterday.
No, it was easy.
Yeah, I think the snow is supposed to start happening today here, just in time for that playoff football game here between the Colts and the Chiefs. But we do appreciate you guys joining us this weekend at SCG Live, hashtag SCGINDY for your tweets. Round 1 of 11, that is not a typo. There are 11 rounds of Magic to be played on Saturday. That is a lot.
Over 700 competitors in this event.
Yeah, that is a lot of players. Now, of course, whenever we come to Indy, there's always a really large turnout with so many cities to draw from. You've got Columbus, you've got Cleveland if you want to make the trek. Same can be said of Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee. St. Louis is only 4 hours away. Louisville is only about 3 hours away. Cincinnati. I know this because I went to college here and I've PTQ'd in all of the cities that I've listed, including this one. But going to Purdue, it was actually nice if you were a grinder. For lack of a better term, you got a lot of places to go play Magic on the weekend.
Yeah, I missed New Jersey for much of the same reason. The number of PTQs that we had in a 4 or 5 hour drive was insane, and I think the SCG Open is coming to New Jersey in February.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be a big turnout.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. Somerset had a huge turnout at our Invitational last year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a huge turnout for the players in the Northeast for that particular tournament. You know, it kind of sucks because, you know, I live in Seattle now, where if I do want to play in a PTQ, which isn't really a realistic thing anymore given the job that I do now.
That ship has sailed
yeah,
for
that
the
ship
two
is
of us.
long gone. But, you know, my options were basically Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, and if I'm feeling really frisky, the old drive to Boise.
Ooh.
But that's 8 hours in the car.
Yeah, for me, living out in San Diego gets a PTQ. Orange County / Costa Mesa gets a PTQ, and then you're looking at Las Vegas, Phoenix, Bay Area. It gets bleak in terms of hours driven pretty fast.
Put some miles on that car.
Oh yeah.
Definitely one of the benefits living in the Midwest. If you want to grind out some games of Magic, you could certainly do that.
William looking at his 7 here.
Looks like a 1-lander on his side. I think he just has 1 swamp. He's got a Thoughtseize, and it looks like he's got a lot of spells, and he is going to send it back. Turtenwald sets his hand down. It looks like he is happy to keep his 7. So, again, we'll see if he does have lands, as that was what basically took away the first game for him.
Now, in a lot of matchups, especially one that feels like a control matchup, like the mono black one, you drop a 1-lander on the play, and you just say, yeah, of course I'm mulliganing this.
Yeah.
In the mono black mirror, it's actually a little bit different because the deck actually has a lot of good 1-mana tools to fend off the other deck between Thoughtseize, Duress, and Dark Betrayal.
Yep.
So 1-land hands are actually often more reasonable to be keeping in this matchup than in almost any other matchup in Standard besides something like mono red.
Yeah. It's obviously a calculated risk to be taking, but your deck does have, as you mentioned, those 1-mana spells that can really influence the way the direction of the game goes. And as a result, if you do have a high density of those 1-mana spells and maybe a pack rat, you're probably more than happy keeping. As Vance is going to keep his 7, he's going to lead off with a swamp, and we are underway here in game number 3. Turtenwald going to play a swamp of his own, so no discard spells from Turtenwald this game. Vance plays his second land, no pack rat, as Turtenwald draws a card, and he is going to play a pack rat of his own and pass, forcing Vance to have an answer right now, which he does in Dark Betrayal.
I believe Vance has Underworld Connections in his hand, so that's going to put a lot of pressure on Turtenwald to either answer it potentially with a discard spell or get his own online.
Plays a Tempo to see, looks at the top card, it's an Erebos, and he's going to keep it. So Turtenwald's going to play a Mutavault, he's going to play an Underworld Connections on the Mutavault and pass the turn back. Vance is going to take a draw step here. He has a Swamp. And we'll see, because he has Erebos, he has Desecration Demon, and he has Underworld Connections, all which are basically at this point 4-mana spells. Connections, of course, being a 3-mana spell, plus 1 for the activation. And he's going to play a Nightveil Spectre and pass the turn back.
And you know, if we've seen any contrast in styles between these two players here, it's Owen's prioritized getting his card drawing online, while William has been trying to deploy his threats.
Yep.
I like Owen's tact a lot better as, again, these decks are so good at trading with each other's threats. The games are going to come down to a lot of just card count. How many cards have you drawn? So
Duress is going to reveal a Connections, an Erebos, and that Desecration Demon that we did mention. So those are the last 3 cards in Vance's hand. Turtenwald's going to write down that information, then select a card with the Duress. I think it's kind of, I mean, obviously he has 2 choices because he can't take the Desecration Demon. It feels like the Connections is probably the better one to be taking here.
yes.
That's when he's going to select and he passes the turn back. Now you see he didn't make his land drop on this particular turn, but he does have a Dark Betrayal in his hand, I believe, to take care of that Nightveil Spectre. Vance is going to start by playing another copy of Temple Deceit, put the top card to the bottom, and we'll probably see him go to the attack step momentarily. See if he wants to fire up that Mutavault or not. He's going to play an Erebos right now. And Dark Betrayal will take care of the Spectre. So, Vance does have 5 lands in play. Top card is a Mystery, and Erebos is in play, so he does have a card-drawing engine. Turtenwald going to start his turn by activating Connections, draw a card, move down to 18.
Yeah,
he does not find a land, but he does have a pack rat.
Yeah, Owen is bottlenecked here pretty badly on mana. As long as he can find productive things to do with his mana in the meantime, it's not the end of the world, but he does need to find an additional source of mana pretty soon here.
Desecration Demon going to come down here for Vance, and as you did mention, there is that contrast between the 2 players where Vance is trying to get his creatures online and start trying to kill Turtenwald, while Turtenwald is just trying to draw as many cards as he can. He finally does draw his 4th land in a swamp off the Connections, goes to go down to 17, plays a land, is going to play Hero's Downfall to take care of the Desecration Demon and get it in for 1, excuse me.
And that's a huge draw for Owen there for all the obvious reasons, and he can really start deploying his threats, deploy multiple spells in a turn soon. He had to find that 4th land eventually, and,
yeah,
and timing was good.
26 lands in the deck, 4 of them are going to come into play tapped with 4 Temple Deceits in Turtenwald's list, and then he's got, of course, 18 Swamps and 4 copies of Mutavault. But the key thing here is that he does have 3 Swamps in play, so if he does have a Nightveil Spectre hiding out in his hand, or does draw 1, he can actually deploy that threat, turn on those Gray Merchants, and do everything else that Mono Black Devotion is known for doing.
We'll see if William starts spending some of his mana here to draw cards here. He's kind of eschewed these lines in previous games we've seen here, but all right, he's going to be drawing off of Erebos here. Needs to be keeping up with the card count here for sure.
Swamp is the card that's drawn. He's going to pass the turn back. Now he does have a Mutavault among those lands, I believe. As Vance will pass the turn over to Turtenwald. Turtenwald draws his card. I believe an Erebos is added to his hand. He does have a Duress hanging out there. Multiple Underworld Connections as well, but he doesn't need those right now. What he really needs right now are just lands, and he finds a Temple of Deceit off of the top.
All these lands are really big draws for Owen.
Across comes the old Pack Rat. He's going to discard Duress to make another copy of Pack Rat. And if you did read his V. Mousevich's article about Pack Rat, it just says just activate it. Just activate it. That's all you got to do.
Yeah. Since your future ones get so much better,
Yeah.
then you need to have a really good reason to not be doing it once you've started to go down that road.
Temple Deceit post-combat. Turtenwald's going to take a look at the top card of his deck and see where he wants to place it before passing the turn back to William.
And it's especially important in these. It's especially important in these mirror matches because there's no sweeper, there's no detention sphere, there's no mutavault. So once the pack rat gets online, there's really no getting out from under it without chaining off multiple removal spells.
Yep.
So when you identify a spot like Owen just did, where you can make a rat there and have a pretty productive turn, it puts a lot of pressure on William to find multiple removal spells here.
Yep. There's a Grey Merchant. It's going to be a drain for 3, 2 from the Grey Merchant itself, 1 from the Erebos. So a little bit of swing in life totals here, but you can certainly, it may not look like Turtenwald is ahead right now, but I would say that he is actually the player that is ahead. Yes, he's behind on life, and he doesn't have the biggest creatures on the board, but again, Pack Rat can really just grow out of control, and it'll be much too difficult for William to actually catch up, as now you see the rats are just going to come into the red zone here.
Yeah, and Owen has a lot of resources to play with, obviously, in terms of just cards in hand and various options here. So
that's what happens when you draw some extra cards.
Yep.
Underworld Connections. Looks like we're going to see an activation here of Pack Rats. Underworld Connections is going to go to the graveyard. Rat token is going to come into play. Mutavault's going to get activated by Turtenwald. Going to turn the rat into a 4/4. So 4 damage is going to go across to Vance. 4 damage is going to take care of the Grey Merchant. And he wisely keeps his Mutavault open to be able to activate the Underworld Connections. Does not draw a land, but just passes the turn back. And again, just has the better board at this point.
Yeah. Williams really only out from this spot is punking Owen out with multiple Grey Merchants, and since Owen has a Grey Merchant of his own, that's unlikely to be something that William can put together.
3 mana. There's a Hero's Downfall to take care of the actual Pack Rat. But again, even though it doesn't say it on the Pack Rat tokens, most people know how Pack Rat works. It's a clone of that actual card, not just a token, so you can activate the actual token of Pack Rat to make more Pack Rats, which is why it is the most frustrating card to play against ever.
Your opponent top decked another rat. How unreasonable.
Yep. You do not get to interact with the removal spells against the rat. But I mean, for the players watching at home who are watching the Mono Black Mirrors, you mentioned it's a difference in play style between the two players, where Vance is trying to deploy his threats and Turtenwald is just trying to draw as many cards as he can, so he has as many options as possible to take care of the threats that are presented from Vance. And I think of the two styles, I think Turtenwald's is the one that works the best in the mirror.
Yeah, and we've, as you see, William come across here with the Mutavault. Owen, if he wins this game, it will be probably Pack Rat dealing lethal damage. And we saw Pack Rat do it in the second game. But don't be fooled. In my mind, Underworld Connections was the defining part of Owen winning both of these games.
I agree 100%.
The card count and making sure he was making his land drops when he was struggling to do so, that was the critical piece. The Pack Rat was almost kind of incidental. Could have been some whatever.
Had to clean up with something.
Right.
It might as well be an incredibly difficult to answer threat that's incredibly efficient, but I mean, cleaning up with something at the end of the day is what you need to do after you draw a bunch of cards, and that's what Pack Rat has allowed Turtenwald to do. But I agree with you. It's Underworld Connections is the card that actually, got him out from underneath the mana problems, found him the necessary answers, found him the Pack Rat. Is going to discard a Connections to make another copy of Pack Rat, and he's going to fire in here for 4, 8, 9, 10. And with a Grey Merchant in his hand right now, that will be it'll be lethal next turn.
Right. For those of you who possibly think that we miscounted the damage, Pack Rat gets power and tendency equal to the number of rats in play, and Mutavault among every other creature type in Magic is a rat.
It is.
So that's another small synergy that the Mono Black Devotion deck has access to.
Probably the best Mutavault deck.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
I think it's the best Mutavault. I mean, obviously, Mono Blue Devotion is a good Mutavault deck, but I think that this is the best Mutavault deck among them, just because of the interaction with Pack Rat. I think is why it's the best one. You see, a Thoughtseize is going to get fired off here. Turtenwald hand is stock loaded. He's got 2 Grey Merchants, 2 Erebos, a Devour Flesh, a Nightveil Spectre, and a Hero's Downfall. That's what happens when you draw a bunch of extra cards, of course.
It has to be something.
Yeah, there has to be some relevant cards hanging out over there. Mutavault's going to come across. It's going to get blocked by a 3/3 Pack Rat token.
You see William essentially just conceding here.
Yeah, waving the white flag, as it were. As Turtenwald's going to quickly untap. He'll take a draw step. We'll see if he wants to do it in the red zone or if he wants to do it with the Grey Merchant. Red zone it is, and that is going to do it. So Turtenwald's going to win this match over William Vance 2-1. The Grand Prix Albuquerque champion with Mono Black. He's running it back this weekend, and he gets 2014 started off right with a win here.
And when we talk about Owen, we we often just say former player of the year, Owen Turtenwald. In my mind, back-to-back Grand Prix wins, which he was able to rip off not that long ago in Albuquerque and DC, is nearly as impressive of an accomplishment as that. I mean, to win 2 separate enormous tournaments with stacked competition, back-to-back weekends, and entirely different formats too. It wasn't like he just has this really good handle on Mono Black Devotion and won 2 Standard Grand Prix. He won a Standard Grand Prix and a Legacy Grand Prix. A really impressive run from Owen.
One of, if